Good day to you all. I'm Kitty Tomsick and I'm with Mallory Dansereau, and we are the ladies of Sycamore Spring Clothier. And we'd like to talk to you today about Regency gowns. We've been asked many questions about our gowns, and one of the questions that we've asked when we make them are gowns made from saris. How do we pick the saris for our gowns? And this is just going to be a real quick brief overall to acquaint you with the do's and don'ts when you're looking to buy saris to turn into Regency gowns. But before I go there, I do want to make one point. One of our other ladies, Julia, asked the questions, are saris historically accurate to the Regency period? Well, we've done some research and we found that Kashmiri shawls were definitely used during the period to turn into gowns. But I could find no extant example of a sari gown. So I called my font of all knowledge, Mackenzie Schultz of Fig Leaf Patterns, and asked her. And she said, yes, she thinks they probably did. You figure a sailor is going to India and he wants to bring back something lovely for his wife, so he would bring a sari back. A regular sailor would probably bring a cotton one. An officer would bring a silk one. And a lady in England would look at this, or in America would look at this beautiful fabric and go, oh, this is gorgeous. But all she sees is 5 to 6 yards of fabric. She doesn't see that it's actually a piece of clothing from the continent of India, and it was worn as a whole piece. So she would take it, we're quite sure, and cut it apart into a gown she could use, because this is 5 yards of fabric. Waste not, want not. So according to Miss Mackenzie, yes, we're pretty certain that they did have them. And I would like to make a point that some of our gowns patterns are from her line, the Fig Leaf Patterns. They're wonderful patterns, so if you ever have a chance to use one, you can buy with complete certainty that it's going to work. When you're looking to buy a sari, there's 3 things you need to look for. And there's 3 parts of, there's more than 3 things, but there's 3 parts to a sari. You have what's called the pallu. This is that big, broad section of the sari that generally hangs over the woman's wrist, her arm, or over her shoulder. The second part that you want to look for is called the border, which is quite obvious. This is the border. And you're going to find the border usually upon both the top and the bottom of the sari. The third part of the sari is called a field, and this whole extent from here on back is called the field. And it can contain all sorts of things, and we're going to show you some of those examples. Now, also you have to realize, because these are pieces of clothing, these are real pieces of clothing, you can get them on eBay, Amazon, Etsy, anywhere you look, they will have them. What you have to remind yourself and be aware of is, as these were pieces of clothing, they were worn, and they can be susceptible to stains. So you can see a stain right here on this particular piece. This is a gorgeous piece of silk. The fabric is, the border is an undershot embroidery, but it does have some damage. So you have to buy them knowing there may be pieces, parts that will have stains, little spills, maybe some snags, but you work around it because it's well worth it. Because remember, you're getting at least 5 yards of fabric. Now on the sari that we have right here, the field is just solid silk. It's a tussa silk, so it has some stiffness, some body to it. It's awfully awesome. This here is all embroidered. If I pull it back, you can see the embroidery underneath. Now, because you have all these threads running underneath the Regency sari, you would really want to have a lining here to keep it from snagging on anything else. So keep that in mind when you're making your sari. The unusual thing about this pallu is that it's a solid piece. There's no other motifs to it. And I'll show you some samples of what I mean when we get later on to some of our others. So, the 3 main parts, the pallu, the field, and the border. This is another beautiful piece. We have several. Most of ours that we have here are silk. They're either silk or cotton. Wool is very, very rare. I've only really heard of one. But this one is stamp printed. And you can see the pallu on this one is much broader, much wider. The field continues from here, clear through to the other end. And please realize there's at least 5 yards of this. So sometimes you may have as much as a yard in the pallu. But when you look at this, think to yourself, how can I use this? How am I going to cut my bodice out of this? How am I going to cut my sleeves? So keep your eyes open for how you can use the motifs that are in there. Also realize that some of these are directional. This one is obviously very directional. There's an up and a down to it. And this one is unusual in the fact that there is no border. Now look at this one. Now you can see this pallu and how the different colors they can put in there and the different motifs. And you do have to watch your motifs. You don't want something that is outrageously Indian, like elephants coming across or something like this, or temple gods and goddesses dancing. You want them to go more towards the floral, because that was more attractive at the time, and they would have been more useful to them. Again, a smaller pallu, you can see how you could use your bands in some way, maybe around the sleeves perhaps. Maybe if you're doing a bib front bodice, you could do this. Bandings, you could use a band like this around the waistband, for example, or the cuff of your sleeve. Lots of ways you can use that. And also look at this field. How gorgeous is this? And this does run all the way through, top to bottom, with a very small little border print on this, which would be absolutely darling around the bottom of your gown. Again, another silk one. This one to me would be a little harder to use as far as this front part for your bodice and sleeves and things, because this motif is so centrally placed here. But this part could definitely be beautifully used as part of your gown. Again, this is a nice little block printed one with the pattern running all the way through from top to bottom, side to side, with some real beautiful little borders. There's also different types of silk that you want to look for. A tussah silk is a little firmer. They also have them thin, like China silk, so you just have to be aware of that. You can't always feel it from what you're looking at, so you have to go mostly with what you like as far as color. We love this one. This again is another embroidered pallu, smaller, going to be easy to use, but look at this beautiful field on this one. That just screams period to me. And look at the border. It's just absolutely awesome with a little ombre effect going on here. So it goes from this copper color to the wine. And it rustles so pretty. Yet another one. Again, notice the colors on this one, but this one is just so cute with the flowers on it. Again, with the all-over design. We have the printed and embroidered design on this one. This one happens to have both. And the border carries all those colors down and through there, and the border is totally embroidered. So once again, you'd have to have some kind of lining on this to keep the threads from catching on your slippers, for example. Now this is some of the silks, and now we're going to show you some more of the cottons. So now we're going to explore the cottons, because they're just a little bit different in their feel. This is a good way to get some real good India cotton mull muslins. And I have a piece to show you, a really beautiful piece of mull. This one here is a little heavier. You can't quite see through it, although it's a very sheer one. Again, this pallu is very simple, just the stripes, so I can see this being worked vertically on your bodice piece. It'd be wonderful on the crossover. And the neat thing about this is all these little dots here are actually embroidered inside with this gorgeous, gorgeous border to match. Lovely soft peach, be a very delicate one. But what I wanted to show you was this blue one. This one is even finer muslin. It's so fine, you can actually see my hand quite clearly through there. When the light hits it just right, can you see my ring? It's very, very sheer, but what is just so gorgeous is this silver border that's down here like this. And you can see how stunning that would be on the bottom of a Regency gown, especially if you trimmed up with silver ribbons or bows or some silver ruching that went here and just carried that silver through your whole piece. And this is it. This is solid. There is no pallu with this one. It's just a beautiful solid piece of muslin with the embroidered down here. So this is just one type of sari. But the next piece is really, truly extraordinary. This sari is actually like a bobbin net. In England, it'd be called Point d'Esprit. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. All those little dots are actually embroidered into this netting. And it has been printed with these flowers down here. This is actually the pallu section of the whole sari. So when you're doing this, you definitely have to have some kind of an underbodice with it. And whatever you put underneath it, will, if it had white underneath it, for example, it would really pull out these flowers and make it stand out. But Mallory also noticed on this that the borders are two different sizes. Here it's very, very narrow. And down there at the bottom of the skirt, it'd be very, very wide and be absolutely gorgeous. This could make an evening gown so neatly and so sweetly, because they did use net for many of their gowns. And this one is already done there for you. Again, this is a cotton comparable to the English Point d'Esprit.
And it just moves splendidly.
Oh, it sure does. Look at that. Again, another piece of cotton, and this one is just so, so gorgeous, gorgeous. We just had to share this one with you because of the tricolor embroidery that's on it. And this embroidery runs the whole length of the fabric, top to bottom. It's all that. And as you can see, it does have a direction to it, so it's very directional. You'd have to use it going up and down like this. I think this would be a little tougher to work in, but I could see these motifs here definitely being used somewhere, perhaps as trim around the neckline, around your cuff. If you're doing a crossover, it can go on each side of your crossover. There's lots and lots of possible potentials with this, but the really beautiful part is all this embroidery. And again, this is another piece that would absolutely have to be lined from beginning to end because of the carry under of the threads. Back once more, I want to show you some don'ts. These are some that I bought when I was first looking for saris and found out how sorry I was when I bought them. Pun totally intended, because I'm telling you, I learned these things the hard way, and that's why I'm sharing this with you. This is what you need to keep in mind. This piece looked gorgeous online. It had all this hand embroidery. I mean, it was just beautiful. The color was great. It looked awesome online. But when I got it, as you can tell by my hands, this embroidery is very, very large. Now, if you want to use it, you probably still could, but I wouldn't because I like finer embroidery. This looks a little too hokey country to me. I don't know how else to put it. It just didn't suit, madam. But there is something else I want to let you know. When you're looking at saris, please type in 100% silk or 100% cotton. And the reason I say that is because if you don't, and even if you do, it'll still pop up, there's a term called art silk, A-R-T, art silk. That's an artificial silk. It's generally a polyester. So if you were looking at a sari and you found one you just love, 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 and it says art silk, 100% art silk, bear in mind it's going to be 100% polyester, and if you're smart, you will not buy it.
The biggest thing to note about poly blends or poly silks or poly cottons, whether you're making your own pieces or having them made for you, they don't wear the same. So a lot of material or a lot of clothing was cut in a specific way so that it could take advantage of the natural give of the fabric, and poly doesn't give quite the same way that linen or cotton or wool does, or even silk. So when you wear it, it is likely going to fit a bit more snugly. It also doesn't breathe nearly as well. So at least if you are not one who cares necessarily about fiber content, you should at least know what you're getting into. It's not going to wear quite the same. As long as you make the adjustments to the pattern, you can make it fit a little bit better. But just know, if you're going to make a pair of breeches or trousers with something with poly, it's not going to give around the legs like it's supposed to. And I'm also going to pull this up so you can get a better, closer look.
Polyester also doesn't wear the same, and it doesn't sew the same. It does not maintain an edge. So when you're pressing in pleats, for example, they just kind of release because it's a plastic. Polyester is a plastic. It has its original memory. It does not remember what you just ironed into it. It just remembers its original shape. So we try never ever to use polyesters, any artificial fabric here at Sycamore Spring. We are very conscious of using natural fibers only. Now, this is why at the very beginning I was telling you the three parts to look for, which was the pallu, the field, and the border. And when you're looking at them online, a lot of times they'll show you just this much of it. So you think, wow, this design here runs all the way through the sari. Well, no, it doesn't. There's different types of sari, and this particular type of sari has a very concentrated design down here. But then, Malin, if you grab that one down there and pull it, as you can see, the design gets sparser and further apart, so you don't get what you thought you were getting in the first place when you first looked at the initial picture, which was this. Because I would love a gown with this all over, but I'm not going to get it. So if you find one you like, and you see it starting to do that, recognize you may only have 4 yards of fabric that has a very linear dot pattern. So if that appeals to you, go ahead and get it. And use this other part for your bodice and your cuffs and things like that, and may or may not use the palu at all. But you can see how if I did that, had this as my skirt part, and this with all the dots as the upper part, that still plays really, really, really well as a gown, but you just don't have as much fabric. So it just depends on how wide you want to do it. So again, be very cautious when you're looking. Check out everything. Oh, here's another one. You can see how this has a little bit of staining right there, a little fading. Again, this is a used garment. They're all used garments. Take that in mind. If you don't want to have a used spot on your gown, don't. But think of it this way. If you do get a spot on your gown, you won't be the first one to put it there, so it's not nearly as bad. We hope that answers some of your questions about buying saris if you want to make your own. If you don't want to make your own, contact us here at Sycamore Spring Clothier, and maybe we can set you up with something special just for you. Thanks, guys.